And I think it would be useful to re-hit just a tiny bit of the context about what strategy is in this process. And so a reminder that this strategy meeting process is not an official part of Holacracy. It's a process that the organization Holacracy One created to use a collaborative process to help a lead link form a strategy. So it does not replace the responsibility on the lead link to create a strategy. It's meant to advise the lead link, and so that's just a little reframe of what it is that we're doing. And I will
Could I add one thing?
Yeah, while I'm getting the screen share.
Yeah, the only thing I would add is we have a strategy. And so this is a strategy update, and that's what I'm looking for input on and collaboration on, and in the context of everything Keith just said.
Okay.
So we got this funky little spreadsheet that's kind of trying to do in a virtual construct what Holacracy One typically does. They reserve their conference room and 2 or 3 hour block, and they get color-coded Post-it notes, and they kind of do all of this in a live environment. And the part of this process that we asked to be completed prior to this meeting is for the circle members to review the current strategy. And I'll look at that in a minute, but to review this and to ask themselves what was done as a result of the previous strategy, and then to record their observations and any specific data or key facts relative to those observations, and to have that as the jumping off point for this part of the meeting. So those current strategies, I thought it would be useful to number them, even though they're not numbered in the system, just so that we could have a reference point. That number 1 is unifying and integrating the organization towards the manifestation of community-based circle-focused model. That's 1. 2, guiding the organization forward in a way that includes absolute intellectual and financial honesty, understanding, and transparency. 3, prioritizing projects and solutions that embody and promote MKP core values, and then they are listed. And 4, emphasizing strategic goals over logistics and logistics over tactics. So we have some members that were that completed their entries, and then what I did was, as I described in our last session, that I would try to kind of glean common threads for most obvious themes out of each of the sharings, and I go through those things that I gleaned, see if you have some other observations. So Dan described that all 4 of them helped his roles focus on what is important, that it guided his roles to focus on the importance of the we, especially has been helpful during post-unification. He thinks we're moving beyond that now. And it has created the we're all MKP USA, support all circles sort of memes. I boiled that to say it's helped him and others move towards we thinking. I didn't find any kind of negative impact in his observation, so see that is a positive impact. I thought someone was going to speak, and they didn't. So
I was just I guessed because I realized that I filled something in under your part.
I did, and that's why I moved it.
Yours. Okay,
I already moved. Yeah, I moved it.
Okay.
So Julian commented that he's seen unification, quite a lot of individual points in Julian's feedback. Unification from separate centers is nearly complete and progress towards functionally complete. That culturally, each one of those centers is still unique and different, which as it should be. There's been progress integrating and standardizing policy procedures, agreements, and decision-making, as well as allocation of resources, and then changing the mental model from us and them to us. And he kind of captured different parts of the us: ECI, area center circle, I group circle. We have been distracted by new ideas or initiatives, curriculum that do not immediately contribute to pursuing our purpose or are not realistic in terms of time, money, space, and people available. However, by experimenting, we learned what works and what doesn't. Culturally, he still thinks we have more to do to move the culture in direction of recognizing and celebrating different point of views and learning to tolerate some tensions that cannot be solved immediately, if ever, and to prioritize based on the maximum impact with minimum effort and the basic principle in system theory. I hear in that last sentence almost some of the suggestion on what strategy might be. I thought that whole thing was very useful. I boiled it down to 3 positive items that recognize an impact in the continued centralizing of functions and the impact of unification to centralize resource. And also, like Dan, the us thinking has grown. And I captured as possibly a negative impact that we have sometimes been distracted by ideas that were unrealistic. Ideas and initiatives that were unrealistic.
So the only thing I have an allergy to is the use of the word centralization. I'd prefer the word integration.
Right, okay, I hear that. And in my mind, it's integrating to the central org, right? Because we had 28 or 32, however many separate ones.
Yeah, I just have kind of an allergy to that word in
democracy.
Word? Yeah.
Okay.
And it's in centralized resources too, I think. What would I say? Yeah. Integration, it works, but
integrated resources.
Yeah.
That's a little bit scale of economy.
Yeah.
Right. That's kind of where I was thinking, and I get your word choice.
Yeah.
Ed's feedback is that despite Dan and others' best efforts, thinks that the community-based model has met with significant resistance that is probably rooted in habit and culture than any considered thinking, and that the mindset of the cultures, we're still a training-based organization. Progress has been made, but we have a lot to go, a lot more to go. And I boiled that to, I don't know why that.
I put that in.
Oh,
that was the mistake. That was the mistake I was referring to before. Just delete it. I thought that I didn't realize that was your part. Just delete it.
Hold on.
No, you put the negative. I put the positive.
Got it. So, but you want to, what did you say? I'll capture it in your note. Say it again out loud and I'll.
That to a great extent, we've institutionalized the core values and we have developed strong financial leadership. I'll just copy that and tag it onto the.
Yeah, I know, but I screwed it up. Integration here and integrated. Kind of trying to talk and chew gum at the same time. Okay, Boysen, that he sees, number one, he did the number breakdown, the community-based model. He sees it reflected in the area meetings and on the ground in area councils, that idea of we.
Did you skip Lonnie on purpose?
Lonnie has no entry.
Oh, I see. Oh, I'm
Spencer
sorry.
had no entry, so
yeah, I got it. I'm sorry. I'll catch up.
Believe that community is still in its infancy in many places, but recognize that it creates a near geographic identity that is useful on a tribal level. Sees it beginning to work in places like Gulf Coast and Asheville. Number two, the organizational honesty and transparency. sees us striving for this, believes it is reflected in our growing complexity of responses, and that it indicates commitment to honesty and transparency. The third, about core values, he uses it as a reference point in regular communications and believes others do as well. And the fourth, the glass frog, strategic over logistics, he uses that when he's getting new products out as a means to, for example, with the goal of engaging new prospects, he uses a logistic of a course offering and a tactic of, what is the actual mechanism. So I boiled that to say more of the we, more a repeat of this we, us stuff, and that the values were useful in communication. Possible negative impact or observation is that community is still in its infancy. Anything out of that, Boysen, that you think I need to include or didn't capture?
No, I think that's good. And possible negative is heuristics not well defined.
Okay. Mine is that I broke it by numbers too. I don't observe, I should say, I don't observe much effort going into the community circle model. Perhaps if it were if that model was referenced and defined, that had a direct relationship to an organizational revenue stream, then I could more easily see the positive impact. The community model seems a little bit more like lip service than actually a functional or positively impactful. How many communities have any function or gravitas 6 months after they charter 12 months? That was one observation. Number two, about the financial honesty and transparency. It seems a little wordy, but that one example I believe has been useful example was how we pursued the certified leaders from other regions. The core value seems valuable, but I have trouble connecting that as a priority in an action project way of thinking, kind of from a role. The last is that I think that is a little bit of a throwaway and that few understand it. It's actually a built-in strategy in Glassfrog software. And then overall, I think that there's too much. Strategy-wise, there's too much. And by the nature of it being too much, it's confusing. That exposes us to being easily distracted and haphazard in attending to everything instead of a couple specific things, and that we end up being in exception management. Boil that to say we have made difficult decisions in a transparent way, and then possibly that if we're elevating community, that some communities are I wrote lay fallow, that may be really dramatic, but empty. That I think we experience confusion, we're easily distracted, and that we manage exceptions too much. Deb, thank you for putting that note in here. Unification, post-unification redefinition of governance and administration, reasonable and ongoing. Community-based model seems to not have commonly agreed upon definition of success. Circle focus at support services level, mixed elsewhere. We can have both, holacracy and other. Number two, the guiding in the transparency needs more granularity and specificity for success of those items. Three, more granularity and specificity for making that action, and not sure what the fourth one means. I think if I boiled that in the moment, I would say, progress, post-unification progress, perhaps community model needs definition, support services, integrate circle concepts, but that others may not, more granularity. And then I'm just going to say more granularity, specificity. Is there some main theme you think I might be missing, Deb, in that?
No, I think, you know, they're noble and lofty goals, but difficult for me to translate into real, well, SMART goals. What are the real deliverables to define success? Real life, real world applications and success metrics.
Yeah, thank you. That resonates. Bob also, that's who else I didn't say who wasn't here. Not present. Robert, communities have chartered and built some infrastructure. To varying degrees, areas now understand that communities, what they can do as communities and what happens collaboratively at an area level, although some silos and power centers still persist. 2, support services and areas have published more, meaning the transparency has published more, though not always in ways that promote communication and transparency for the individual members. Core values are, the roles are better aligned under holacracy to promote the core values, and the values are often cited as the force that drive tensions and their resolution. Policies are also evaluated more clearly. I believe he means in relation to the values. And 4, that roles generally prioritize projects and actions and align with that strategy than before.
I love hitherto-for.
That's very Robert, I gotta say. That's very. The boiling here, chartering of communities, that's a positive impact that has happened. There's more communication that's going in and out. Sometimes the communication that is available is not useful. Perhaps maybe you have another way to word that. And then more alignment and evaluation, I should have said, in relation to values.
If I may interrupt, the Manafort jury delivered verdicts on 8 counts. I don't know what the verdicts were because I don't have my sound turned on.
Yeah, that's all it says, verdict on 8 counts.
So they're still meeting on the other counts?
Yeah, it says can't reach consensus on 10.
What I would say, Keith, there is that sometimes the communication available is not easy for individuals to use.
It's not easy for
individuals to find and use.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, I can't tell you the number of times I get calls and I go, oh God, I know exactly where that is, but how do I tell you to get to it?
Yeah.
So it's communication about something, but then they don't know how to employ it or something.
Yeah. Or where would I find it? You know, and it's the problem with, you know, MKP Connect is quite vast and there aren't clear paths and we don't have a good heuristic search engine to find things.
And once in a while, it's only half-assed.
Okay, well, let's not caution a little too much specificity right at this stage, maybe.
Yeah.
So is there anything, though, missing now that I've got that clarified a little better?
So my attention is what's missing is the input of the other lot members, but I just wanted to say that, to say it. So.
Agreed.
And I have one thing. This is always the case.
Sure.
When you work on strategy with smart, results-oriented people, the conversation has a strong drift toward tactics. Strategy is really about deployment of where we're deploying, tells us where to deploy resources. And I'm getting a lot out of this, and I also want to keep, and I'm sure it won't be the last time I do it, keep cautioning us to stay at the strategic level rather than the specific actions and outcomes level. I think the way Keith's got this divided into 4 parts is at a very strategic level, and then the question becomes, how do we deploy resources toward those 4 goals, and are there goals, not goals, but strategies that are missing or that shouldn't be there?
So yeah, so we've got, you know, if we think that missing some of the team's input, if we then proceed to the next retrospective, which is to look again at this material, the actual impacts now. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy them and paste. And I know that Rich and Carmel haven't had any input yet, so let me paste this. And knowing that, you know, you weren't really asked to provide any input in advance, and that, pardon me, you may not even have had much opportunity to review these strategies. Just though, still want to give you an opportunity that in hearing them today and hearing some of our feedback and conversation about them, do you have any observation about how well these have worked, or any impacts that you might have observed about how well, or what impacts, positive or negative, might be at play, knowing that those have been in place since December 2015? Either of you?
Yeah, I'm not that well versed to comment deeply. I can say my observation is that the gay community out here in NorCal is seemingly much more on focus to grow their community support and community side of things. They're actually kind of leading the way, in my opinion.
So that's an example of how community and circle is being emphasized, that you're observing?
Yes.
Is energized, and what are some of the possible impacts of that you're observing?
They're actually, I think, as an example, showing the rest of the community what opportunities are possible.
What is possible? Very good.
They did some great fundraisers. They did a bunch of stuff last year. It was just awesome.
Other activities. Okay. Awesome.
Can we say GBTQ rather than gay?
Okay. Thanks, Ed.
Oh. I had a little too many letters in my acronym. Okay. Useful. Rich, you have any thoughts? I know it's early in this.
Well, not specifically, but I do have a question which is going to piss everybody off.
Thanks for the warning, Rich.
Well, I just and the number one strategy of unifying and integrating the organization toward manifestation of the community-based, circle-focused model. We are, evidently this group is assuming that that's what we want to do. And there's only a couple people on this group that were there when that was done. And I realize I'm outside the box here. What I'm wondering if that is, have we really looked at that as being our number one strategy?
I'm not pissed off at that, Rich. I don't know why you think people would be.
Well, because I'm questioning the number one line. I'm wondering when something has been when we've been doing something for 3 years now, 4 years, and it's not working like we thought it should work. Is it not time to look at that goal? I don't know. I'm not suggesting change it, but what I'm seeing and feeling is it's not working very well.
Well, yeah, and that's part of the update that I want, Rich. Maybe that's why you're not pissing me off. I want to look at that in that light. Now, I differ with your assessment, but I think it's worth, after 4 years, looking at that as our number one goal, not based on is it working or not working, but on is it still the direction that we're committed to going.
I'm going to ask the process question to the facilitator. Is something we should be, can be looking at? Or,
Well, you know,
why it's our number one and how it came to be.
And really, so to be honest, there is no number one. There's no really hierarchy of a priority, and that's one other bit of the context of strategy, is because that might be useful to just remind ourselves that the way that these strategies are deployed in Holacracy is that this is not an actual goal. It's not a tactical outcome that we're pursuing.
Thank you.
It's a way for us to orient what we do, right?
Exactly.
And if my role has a responsibility to do ABC, what I need to be doing when I'm doing ABC and deciding in that day, okay, I've got a whole bunch of ABC to do, I should be doing that aspect of it that will help us manifest community-based, circle-based models.
You're back.
Right? So it's not that I'm trying to do a thing or we're trying to do this as a thing. That's really supposed to flavor or inform our choices in how to spend our time.
Boy, that's really well said. That's really well said. That's entirely consistent with what I said earlier, and it's stated better that strategy is about deployment of resources. So resources are time, money, and talent. So it's as we're applying time, money, and talent, are we doing it consistently with these strategic foci? And if we're not, or if we don't think we should be, that's the purpose of the update. So that really captured exactly what I want out of this.
Yeah, our circle's purpose is unchanged by these strategies, right? Our circle's purpose, the reason for the organization to be, is going to be unchanged. These are just, and these aren't pass fail, or have we done it, have we not done it? These are, ways to help inform us about how well we're deploying those resources.
Really well, really good.
Like the problem with the fourth one is that what's not said there is that emphasizing that, and that when prioritizing or when looking to see what should I do next.
Right. That fourth one is almost implicit in having a strategy. Strategy always trumps logistics and tactics. But I think it's worth calling out, and I think what you added to it, Bob, is worth adding to it.
Robert, please.
Robert, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
And it does.
I deal with OSER so much, I get confused.
Well, you're right in that. I mean, that is essentially what a strategy is in the way that we're defining it here, that last thing.
Yeah.
And, background for those who are newer, the first one was adopted as a strategy when we took seriously the Act 1 and 2 that what our product is circles of men and not trainings. Because from 2001 to 2010, we were calling ourselves a training organization.
Right.
Yeah.
And
go ahead.
Yeah. So this was to remind us that what we do, what the world wants from us, which is the Holacracy definition of purpose, is circles of men, circles of awake, grown up, showing up, cleaning up men.
Yeah, I would say that's the first thing I've heard on this subject that I'm a little uneasy with, because I don't think what the world wants from us is circles. I think what the world wants from us is healthy, awake men.
And
this is brilliant.
To me, the best example of what we have to offer the world is all the things that the Ron Herring Award winners do, and all the Couch Award winners do. That's our product. Is awake men. And so one of the things I just wanted to say here is it seems to me that first strategy goes beyond strategy when it says manifestation, because strategy is not about a manifestation. So I think that the strategy is unifying and integrating the organization, period. And then it can be pointed at whatever it needs to be pointed at. So I think, and then the other piece that is just, it's really my problem, is I've never heard anybody articulate the community-based or focused model ever.
Not been around Mike very often.
Well, actually, I had a long conversation with Mike, and he said geographic proximity, and he said stuff like that. But I'm still not satisfied. So,
Okay.
Well, the problem is the way it's stated biases it toward green, and I don't think that's what we mean.
Yeah. So what you said, Ed, really takes us back to one of our first identity statements, I guess it would be. We empower men to missions of personal service.
Right.
Yeah. And that's something we still don't emphasize enough.
You know, this is great. And this is the sort of thing that's supposed to be outed in this process. And I think y'all are almost at step 3 or 4, right, already in kind of identifying the types of things that might be the outcome of what we end up advising the lead link with, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because they should be very slender and discreet, like Julian said, whether that's one that we end up with. You know, they should be, again, almost like a value, a prioritization, even if it isn't a heuristic that says this over that, it should be simple enough that it can be easily referenced and kept in mind when I'm doing my daily task or you're doing your daily task.
You agree?
I just hadn't thought, just to throw it out there for future reference, if we took the integral wake up, show up, grow up, clean up, and plug that into number 4, how do we see our emphasis? And from what we were just saying, that would be about showing up.
I'm not quite tracking with you, Robert.
Okay, in integral, we talk about, the tasks are to wake up, grow up, show up, clean up, show up. I think there's just 4. Correct me if I'm wrong.
Yes.
And we really spend a lot of our time doing waking up or growing up and cleaning up. That's what we do well on the weekend. The growing up and showing up, we don't see, my judgment, we don't tend to do as much. And if we really are about empowering men to missions of service, we should be doing a lot more emphasizing how men can show up in the world after they've, the whole thing we did about wound worship, and we sort of got away from that. We may need to do more of it.
Well, and it isn't necessarily in the NWTA. Carmel's point about the GBTQ community in NorCal is they are showing up big time, as they are in other places. And, we may need to look at how we do more of that. When we stand with Pine Ridge during the pipeline thing and all that, that's showing up. So yeah, I think we're exactly on the right track here. I'm really excited about this conversation. And if I don't look excited, that's what excited looks like over here.
So are you saying something like a strategy to emphasize men's continued, I don't know if you're saying growing up, showing up in whatever, blah, 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 post-NWTA? I'm hearing you say we get to wake up at the NWTA and we want to emphasize continued community, whatever approaches to allow men to continue to grow up and show up.
And clean up.
And clean up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But that our ultimate purpose is to send men out in the world with purpose, which is showing.
Is that purpose or is that strategy, what we were just saying?
Well, the purpose is what does the world want from us? And Ed suggested that what the world wants from us are mature, awakened, grown up, cleaned up men who are showing up in mission.
So the strategy is to wake them up with the NWTA, and you have a further strategy to promote their showing up, growing up, and cleaning up by
community.
In community.
There you go, right there.
In community. The tactics, our I groups, it's groups like NorCal Pride. It's there's lots of tactics, but it's
in community, for example, I groups, blah 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 blah. Perfect. And then you get your granularity and stuff.
So so one of the titles of one of my social work textbooks is Individual Change Through Small Groups. small groups is how people change. I mean, it's technology that we've used for a long time, and we're using it. So
That's the
And
Margaret.
according to Margaret Mead, it's how the world changes.
I can't believe you just said Margaret Mead the second that I said Margaret Mead.
Oh yeah,
That's creepy.
no,
But that's, you know,
built
that's
into our weekend.
it is.
And actually, it also moves the NWTA as one of our strategies. It's not
Yeah.
on purpose anymore.
Exactly.
It's
So,
a tactic.
so Keith, we've got 15 minutes left.
Understand.
What's the
I'm
next
trying to get
step?
there, but I also wanted to let y'all talk a bit.
Yeah.
So let's go to the next deal here. And the next deal is that this week's homework. So now what I've done here is I've pasted in facilitator observations for common threads of impact. And so I know that there's some entry already in here. You can keep or replace or whatever. But in your row this week, what we ask you to do is now, again, you know the strategies. Now you're seeing your own stated observations of impact, and you've heard other people's observations of the impact of the current strategies.
Mm-hmm.
Now in this space, we want to ask you to think from your role. Instead of, before then we were thinking about we're just the circle. Now think from your role and describe any tensions that you feel in your role based on the observation.
Interesting.
Okay, so what, and I'll put this in a written thing as well to the group, but what tension does your role in this circle feel when observing the cumulative impacts, right? And then to state those tensions. That's all we're doing right now. We're not trying to solve the tension. We're not trying to say, I think your role ought to do this. Just think about your role in this circle. And, you know, so in your, this is Dan's column, in 3B, Dan would write what circle organization and support feels as a tension based on these shared observations.
So instead of what's there?
Yeah, well, I don't know why he wrote whatever is in this box.
And,
Let's talk about, so this is your box. This is where you would write your observation.
Because you put the question in G, and I was wondering, but you want us to put the answer in B.
Yes.
you put that your tension there, right?
Yeah, your tension in B, in your,
In
and then
G.
I will capture a cumulative tension list based on what you put. I'll boil that down.
I have a question. Do you think it would be useful to ask the people who have not filled this in, Spencer, Levitt, Oser, I think are the three, to do that first?
You know, if they watch this, that might be enough, because the cumulative circle has already responded on observed impacts. They might have one or two additionals, but they might necessarily see.
Great.
I'm going to put yours, Julian, over in K just for a minute, just so you don't lose it. I saw your note, and that's why.
Keith, I suggest you do this when you're not trying to facilitate at the same time.
I'm just
So,
Fred.
I was trying to get him to do my homework while he was facilitating.
I have a question for you as coach.
Yes, sir.
And it's a sort of philosophical question about the word tension. It occurs to me, and that's from my natural tendency to look from the externals, to think of, tensions as ways I would change things. And I'm wondering, is it also because of the word tension, is there intended to be an interior aspect? In other words, it's not just that I see that it could be done better or differently, but that I feel a need for it, that there's some kind of feeling tone to it that goes beyond, I could do it that better. In other words, that there's some urgency or whatever.
Well, I mean, so urgency, yes, depends upon the degree of the feeling. But,
Yeah.
you know, when we did processing tensions in the group, either this week or 2 weeks ago, it is a body felt sense. You know, Brian Robertson, even though he's a cognitive dude, describes it, body felt sense. It's a quote from him. And it describes not only those things that you might experience as a problem, you know, or like this is keeping me, it's blocking me from doing my thing, but also in regularly reviewing my role's purpose. And I sit and I look at my to-do list, that also brings out tensions. And it's not always problems. They can be opportunities. They can be, gosh, if only we could do blank, instead of, ooh, this is broken and I feel angst. But yeah, there absolutely is a sense of something that needs to change or shift. And that is what they mean by tension. Go ahead, Julian.
Yeah, I was thinking just yesterday or in the ops meeting when we created a project for the future. It's not really important enough or urgent enough to do right now, but it was the felt tension that there was this need that someday might be more urgent, you know, with things changing. So we went ahead and created a project and put it out there in the future. So it's like, what's in my way is one kind of tension. The other is, how could I do this better, even if I can't do it now?
Absolutely.
Sorry.
We just had one in admin IT. Meanwhile, while a rocket launches from Julian's desk.
And that's nice of you to call it a rocket. Yeah.
You know, I'm just being a kind. That we had exactly that. It was sort of like a maybe someday, but we also ended up saying, you know what, that's not that hard. So it's not super important or urgent, but I could still make an incremental improvement over something that staff selection process is used on every NWTA. And we've already implemented it. So
as secretary, I'm going to call time for us to have closing remarks, Keith, or whatever that looks like to you, because we have to be off at 5 of.
I am in love with that. So I'm going to send the video and the written instructs to the circle about filling in any observations of tensions, pro and con, that your role might experience about. So checking out with thoughts about today's session and where we're at in this process, any thing like that. And I'm going to go backwards. I'm starting with you, Carmel. How's that for putting you on the spot?
Yeah, I'm looking forward to just taking the time to look at that tensions from the curriculum side and where, well, we're also getting ready to look at and evaluate what we have approved and where that fits in. So this is really timely for where we're at in curriculum. Good with that.
All right. Julian?
I'll try to talk over my power washer. So I agree it's a good time to look at this, and I'm glad we're doing this. I don't want Carmel to make the same mistakes I made in curriculum, and so I'm very much open to sharing my experience, strength, and hope, as we say in 12-step programs. I love this. I could do it all afternoon and into the evening, but I know we have other things to do. Bye.
Oh, thank you. Boysen?
Truth telling, I've been massively distracted while being on this call, and including not even being in the room for at least 5 minutes. And I will go back and review what's in the spreadsheet, and I think that what's in the recording so that I can move forward. I'm out.
Great. Thank you. Deb?
Really relieved and delighted that we're having this conversation, getting new and better clarification on the strategy, and appreciate the direction we're going with this. I'm out with that.
Great. Thank you. Ed?
How did you set up the checkout, Keith? I was distracted.
Sort of just reflections about the process to date, where we're at.
This has so exceeded my expectations. I'm really thrilled with this conversation. I'm a little, because I'm Jewish and I can't do anything without some guilt, a little guilty that it took me this long to realize this was my job as lead link. But at the same time, really happy that it'll be part of this strategy review will be part of the legacy I leave as lead link. And just really looking forward to the rest of the conversations, and have to rearrange some things to be on next week, but I will. And I'm out.
Great. Thank you. Robert?
Telling on myself, I hate strategy meetings. Always have. I'm not a strategic thinker. I'm a very good logistical and tactical thinker, but strategy is not my forte. I'm glad it is for other people, and this has been much better than I thought it would be. So I'm excited, and I get.
How's it
that,
compared to a root canal, Robert?
Having had several of those recently, I could take out my. No, I'm very pleased, and I think the clarity that Ed and Keith and the rest of us brought to this, that we are on the right path. I was afraid we were going to be talking about a 5-year plan type thing again. I know we said we wouldn't, but too often it gets there. This feels healthy and good, and so I'm glad. I have a practical thing for us on the board. When we do the tensions, remember you have to do it from your lock role and also from your role on the board as it applies to that role, which is different. And I'm out.
Yeah, thank you. Jarvis, Doug, mine is, no, I'll get him.
Okay.
I'm going on my.
I'm used to the facilitator going last.
Well, I broke things. So that I feel good about the collective wisdom and brilliance and observation, available in the room. And so I really have no hesitation about kind of the lofty place that we can get to. I'm just kind of eager for us to get there incrementally and, not too fast, because we have racehorses and they're great. And so it's going to be good. It will be good. And I'm out. Rich?
Yeah, Tosi Crazy Horse. Julian, you may have screwed up one or two things curriculum, but you brought us forward. So get off that you screwed things up. Okay. And this is where I live, by the way. So thank you, Ed. Thank you, Keith. Is where are we going? Why are we going there? And so I really appreciate that. And Robert, you brought up "We empower men to missions of service." That was the original mission statement that was created in 1985 or 1989, after we've been doing the training for 7 or 8 years. I think it still has some applicability, and I'm glad to be part of this circle, and I'm out.
And one last thing, special kudos, Keith. Great job, fabulous job. Thank you.
And totally irrelevant to what we're doing, but I just read on the thing that Cohen says he was directed by a candidate to violate the